A hidden tunnel beneath a property the team thought they knew completely. That's how one of the most significant investigations of Season 7 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch began. Not with a dramatic sighting, not with a strange light on the horizon, with a routine radar sweep that returned a reading nobody expected. A long, defined void running beneath the surface in a section of the ranch with no documented caves, no volcanic activity, and no history of anything unusual below ground. No record of it, not in years of survey data, not in a single technician's notes. Not in a single conversation anyone on the team could recall having about this stretch of land. For a 512-acre property studied as extensively as this one, that kind of silence is not reassuring. It's a red flag. Either every prior survey missed something enormous, or this passage had not always been here to find. Two very different answers, neither one comfortable. Brandon Fugel, who has watched this property produce one surprise after another over the years, described the initial reading as the kind that immediately changes a team's priorities. Not because a void beneath the ground is remarkable on its own. Small pockets and pressure cavities occur in soil all the time. What made this different was the shape, the length, the fact that it sat directly beneath ground the team had walked, studied, and documented for years, without a single indication anything was there. The team wasn't willing to guess which explanation was correct. What followed was methodical. A second, independent instrument brought in to confirm the reading using entirely different physics. Historical records, checked and rechecked for any prior notation. And eventually, a careful excavation to see, physically, what was actually sitting beneath that ground. Each step ruled out one explanation and left a harder one standing in its place. By the time investigators lowered a camera into the passage itself, they were no longer asking whether the tunnel was real. They already knew it was. The question had shifted to something far more consequential: what it was connected to, how long it had been there, and why a property studied this thoroughly had never found it before. This wasn't a curiosity to be logged and set aside. This was ground the team believed they had already accounted for, fully, years ago. A tunnel doesn't simply appear on a property this closely watched. It either hides exceptionally well, or it wasn't always there to hide. Investigators would spend the following weeks trying to determine which. And what they found waiting inside that passage would raise questions far larger than the one they started with. Before anyone was willing to trust a single instrument, the team needed to understand why this particular stretch of ground had slipped through so many prior surveys. It sat, as it turned out, near the boundary lines of several older mapping projects, close enough to each grid's edge that it may have simply fallen into the narrow margin between one team's coverage and the next. Researchers pointed to the sheer size and irregularity of the property itself. Terrain that shifts from open range to rocky outcropping within a few hundred yards. Terrain that has swallowed careful survey work before. It was a plausible explanation. It was also an incomplete one because it didn't answer why, once the boundary gap was identified and closed, the feature beneath it turned out to be this precise, this linear, and this deliberate in its shape. If a blind spot like this existed here, researchers reasoned, it likely was not the only one. The ranch is a patchwork of study zones layered over years of shifting equipment, shifting personnel, and shifting priorities. A boundary gap in one grid meant there could be others, smaller, subtler, waiting in places nobody had thought to double-check. That thought alone was enough to keep the team from treating this discovery as an isolated curiosity. But first, before chasing any other blind spots, they needed to be certain this one was real, and that meant bringing in equipment that had nothing to do with radar at all. A ground-penetrating radar unit interprets reflected radio waves, and radio waves can occasionally deceive even experienced operators, misreading soil density, rock strata, or moisture pockets as something they are not. So the team brought in a magnetometer, an entirely different class of instrument, one that measures disturbances in the Earth's magnetic field rather than reflected signal. If the void was an artifact of the radar's interpretation, the magnetometer would show nothing unusual. If it was real, the two instruments, operating on entirely different physical principles, should agree. They agreed. The magnetometer sweep, conducted independently and without prior knowledge of the radar team's exact coordinates, picked up a corresponding disturbance in precisely the same stretch of ground. For the investigators, that kind of cross-verification carries real weight. It is the difference between a possible glitch and a documented anomaly. Two unrelated instruments, built on two unrelated principles, had each detected the same thing in the same place. Whatever sat beneath that section of the ranch was no longer a question of faulty equipment. It was a question of geology, or something that only resembled geology. The character of the magnetic signature itself introduced a new layer of uncertainty. It wasn't the smooth, gradual disturbance typically associated with a natural void or a simple pocket of looser soil. It had edges to it, transitions sharp enough that some on the team began quietly wondering aloud whether they were looking at a collapsed structure rather than a naturally formed cavity. Nobody wanted to speculate too far ahead of the data, but two confirmed readings, agreeing with each other and behaving in a way that didn't cleanly match anything previously logged on the property, were more than enough to justify going further. The team made the call to put a shovel in the ground. The excavation began modestly, a narrow test trench positioned directly over the strongest section of the combined readings. It didn't take long before the crew hit something unexpected. Rather than the loose, crumbling soil typical of this part of the basin, they encountered a section of earth that was smooth, tightly compacted, almost polished, in places where the trench wall had been exposed. It didn't resemble the kind of gradual erosion you would expect from water or wind working over centuries. It looked shaped, deliberately or not. Something about that surface had been formed with a consistency that natural weathering rarely produces on its own. Field photographs from that first day of digging show a passage opening, narrow but clearly continuous, extending downward and then curving out of sight beneath the surface. The compaction pattern along its walls was consistent for as far as the crew could see without further excavation, which only deepened the puzzle. A natural cave system tends to show variation, wider in some sections, narrower in others, shaped by whatever combination of water flow, mineral deposit, and erosion carved it over time. This did not show that kind of variation. It looked almost engineered in its uniformity, and that single observation was enough to bring in outside expertise before another shovel of dirt was moved. The geologist brought in to examine the samples ruled out one explanation almost immediately. The surrounding rock showed none of the volcanic signatures associated with lava tubes, the most common natural explanation for a long linear void beneath this kind of terrain. Whatever had created this passage, it was not the product of ancient volcanic activity moving through the ground and leaving a hollow channel behind, as has been documented at similar sites elsewhere in the region. That left two possibilities on the table, and neither was simple. The first was some rare, still poorly understood natural process capable of producing this kind of compacted, uniform passage without volcanic involvement, a process not well represented in existing geological literature for this part of the Uinta Basin. The second, more provocative possibility was that the tunnel wasn't natural at all. That at some point in the property's history, whether decades ago or far longer, someone or something had shaped this passage intentionally. The geologist was careful to note that neither explanation could be confirmed from surface samples alone. Confirming either one meant going inside. The camera probe was lowered slowly, its cable marked at regular intervals to track depth as the borescope descended past the excavation site and into the passage itself. For the first several feet, the footage showed exactly what the team expected. Walls consistent with the compacted material already examined. A narrow but navigable channel, curving gently downward. Then, without warning, the handheld EMF meter, clipped to the probe rig, began registering a brief but unmistakable spike, a jump in electromagnetic activity with no obvious source. There is no wiring down there. There are no known mineral deposits in this region associated with that kind of reading. And yet, for several seconds, the meter climbed before settling back to baseline. Almost simultaneously, the temperature probe attached to the rig logged a noticeable drop as the camera continued deeper, a change sharper than what you would expect from simple depth and insulation from surface heat. Neither anomaly, on its own, would necessarily be remarkable. Underground environments can behave in ways that defy casual assumption, but an electromagnetic spike, paired with an unexplained temperature drop, occurring at nearly the same point in the descent, was the kind of coincidence that investigators on this property have learned never to dismiss too quickly. It was the kind of reading that, elsewhere on this ranch, has preceded some of its most significant and most difficult to explain findings. Dr. Travis Taylor, reviewing the logged data afterward, was careful not to overstate what a single brief spike could mean on its own. Instruments occasionally misfire. Cables can pick up stray interference. But he noted that the timing of the readings, arriving together rather than independently, made a simple equipment glitch a less satisfying explanation than the team might have preferred. If it had been only the EMF meter or only the temperature probe, the finding might have been set aside as a fluke and revisited later, if at all. Together, occurring within the same narrow window of the descent, they were harder to wave away. The team made the decision to preserve the full data log exactly as recorded and to treat the passage's deeper sections as a priority for any future descent, rather than a footnote to the discovery already made. That combination of readings sent researchers back through years of the property's own monitoring archives, searching for anything that might connect to this specific stretch of ground. What they found reframed the entire investigation. Scattered across the historical logs were a series of surface-level anomalies recorded directly above this same underground area over the years. Instrument malfunctions that were never fully explained at the time. Brief, unexplained lights reported by field teams working the surface, and localized magnetic disturbances logged during entirely separate studies that had no reason to suspect a tunnel existed beneath them at all. Individually, each of those incidents had been filed away as isolated, unusual but not conclusive, the kind of thing that happens often enough on a property like this that it rarely triggers a deeper investigation on its own. Mapped together against the newly discovered tunnel's actual path, though, a different picture began to emerge. The surface anomalies weren't scattered randomly across the property, they clustered with real consistency along the exact route the tunnel was now known to follow. Nobody on the team had connected these events before, because nobody had known there was anything underground connecting them. That realization changed the scope of the investigation entirely. This was no longer simply a matter of documenting an unusual tunnel. It was a matter of determining whether that tunnel had been quietly influencing the surface above it for years. With that possibility now on the table, the team pushed the probe further than originally planned, extending the mapping effort well past the excavation site to determine just how far the passage actually ran. The early assumption that this was a contained, self-limiting feature collapsed almost immediately. The tunnel did not terminate a short distance from where it had first been detected. It continued, curving gradually beneath the property, tracking a path that eventually brought it beneath another section of the ranch, already well known to researchers and to longtime viewers of this investigation, a location documented for its own history of unexplained activity. The full mapped diagram, once assembled from the probe's depth and directional data, showed something the team had not anticipated. Two areas of the property, long treated as separate zones of interest, each studied on their own terms with their own history of unexplained readings, were physically connected beneath the surface the entire time. Not connected by theory, not connected by pattern or coincidence, connected by an actual, continuous, structurally consistent passage running between them. For a team that has spent years cataloging anomalies, location by location, treating each as its own contained mystery, the implication was significant. If these two places were linked below ground, every reading ever taken at either site now had to be reconsidered in light of the other. Eric Bard, whose work on the property has long focused on tracking exactly this kind of pattern across separate zones, called the confirmed connection one of the more consequential findings to come out of the underground survey program in recent years. His concern was less about the tunnel's origin and more about its implications going forward. If two documented areas of interest are physically joined beneath the surface, any future instrumentation placed above either site now needs to account for the other. A disturbance recorded at one location may no longer be a local event. It may be part of something moving, or settling, or simply existing along the entire length of a passage the team had no idea was there until recently. That shift in thinking, from isolated incident to shared system, is not one the investigation takes lightly. Even with the tunnel's extent now mapped and its connection to a second known area of interest confirmed, the most fundamental questions remain unresolved. Laboratory analysis of the excavated material is still underway, work that may eventually help date the passage or clarify whether its formation truly falls outside known natural processes. The source of the electromagnetic spike recorded during the probe's descent has not been identified. The reason for the temperature anomaly at that same depth has not been explained. And the years of surface disturbances, now understood to trace this tunnel's path, raise a question the team cannot yet answer with confidence. Whether this passage has simply been sitting quietly beneath the ranch for generations, or whether it has been doing something, however subtle, the entire time. What can be said with confidence is this: a structure believed not to exist has been confirmed. Two long-separated areas of unexplained activity on this property have been shown, for the first time, to share a physical connection beneath the ground the team has studied for years. And a pattern of surface anomalies that once seemed unrelated now appears to trace a single, continuous line, one that runs directly beneath the earth. Investigators are only beginning to understand. The team has been careful, throughout every stage of this investigation, to separate what has actually been confirmed from what remains theory. The tunnel exists, that much is beyond dispute, documented by two independent instruments and, ultimately, by direct excavation and camera footage. Its connection to a second site of long-standing interest is equally well established, mapped in detail rather than merely inferred. Everything beyond that, its precise age, the nature of the electromagnetic reading recorded during the probe's descent, and whether the surface anomalies logged over the years were genuinely caused by whatever lies within this passage, remains open. Investigators are not willing to close those questions prematurely, and they have said as much plainly, preferring an honest gap in the record to a tidy explanation that outpaces the evidence. Further laboratory analysis is already underway, and the team has indicated that additional descents into the tunnel are being planned, this time equipped to gather more sustained readings at the exact depth where the earlier anomaly occurred. Whether those follow-up efforts confirm a natural, if unusual, geological process, or whether they deepen a mystery that connects two of the property's most studied locations, is not yet known. What is clear is that a stretch of ground the team believed they understood completely has revealed something new, a reminder that even after years of careful study, this property has not finished offering up its secrets, and that the most significant discoveries here often begin not with a dramatic revelation, but with a quiet, easily overlooked reading on an instrument doing exactly what it was built to do. For now, the tunnel remains exactly what it was the moment the team first confirmed it. Real, mapped, connected to more than anyone initially expected, and still, in its most important respects, unexplained.